and hello students, welcome back to Scholar IAS current affair classes. Let's get into the class to know what are the important articles of the day. The first article is on disinvestment. This is related to your mains GS3 paper economic development, and let's try to understand what disinvestment means. So basically governments hold a particular level of share in public sector undertakings. At least it would have 51%. Through disinvestment, basically the government is either giving up a partially or fully the equity holding of that particular PSU. So what is the agenda behind such disinvestment process? So the main reason is, first thing is the fiscal burden. So instead of governments funding these PSUs, this actually increases the fiscal burden for the government. By disinvestmenting, it reduces that fiscal burden, and it also improves the access to public finances. Basically, this happens because the ownership base is expanded. Now let's say if government is the only shareholder of a particular PSU, then government has to take care of all the losses. If any loss occurs, it would be borne by the government. Even if profit happens, it will be borne by the government, but many of the PSUs that we have now are loss making. So that's why it is the ownership base is being shared among the public or among the private players. And funds development programs and growth prospects of the country would also improve because you have more finances. Instead of adding the pressure that is on the government exchequer is reduced when PSUs are taken off the plate of government. And also it depoliticizes non-essential services. So if there are certain essential service sectors in PSU, then it is fine for the government to have a hold on that particular PSU for strategic reasons. But in case of non-essential services, it is not so. So this basically depoliticizes such services. And also PSU, instead of promoting economic growth, see, when PSUs were actually established after independence, it was actually seen as a pillar of economic growth. But it had ended up as straining the government resources. The main reason being low returns and inefficiency. These are the main two reasons why PSUs have turned into loss-making units. And the strategic sale of ownership of PSUs will actually help to spur competition as well. It's not only about the competition, it's not only about the public finances where the government would have better finances now after giving away the PSUs, but also it promotes competition in that particular sector where PSUs are being disinvested. So that's one aspect to it. And finally, it would actually optimize the government resources to deliver maximum returns. So it's very obvious once we are able to strategically disinvest on certain sectors, the returns are going to be better when many players come in, many shareholders are involved. Okay, so that is what is going to happen. So where will it actually impact this disinvestment process? So India's fiscal deficit for this 2020 and 2021 is about 9% of the GDP. So this is what our fiscal deficit is. So the funds generated from disinvestment of PSUs will help in financing this deficit actually. So this is where the main aspect going to come into picture, because we know under FRBM Act there are certain percentage. It is set as 3% of GDP. The fiscal deficit set as 3%, but right now we have 9.5%. So funds generated from disinvestment would actually help in reducing this deficit. So this widening of fiscal deficit gap will reduce. Next is large scale infrastructure development would happen because now there is more funds available with the government. Also the private sector or the public would also get involved, so the infrastructure would actually develop. Even those sick PSUs would be able to revive with involvement of new ownership and new management. And also social welfare programs can be promoted with the additional funds left with the government. And as we mentioned before, it would actually lead to a competitive environment in that particular sector and would also give better product quality. That are the two basic things. And unlocking key sectors will actually attract sectoral investment, because if right now we know that railways are totally managed by government, but as government started liberating the railway sector for open railway sector for private industries and as well as foreign investments, it attracts investment. So what happens? The competition increases and that particular sector booms. That's what happens. Now there should be a question that should be arising to us. In case if sick PSUs are there and if they are sold, it's logical. But why is that government selling profit making PSUs? Why is that government actually selling that? So the main very easy logic is that no party would be interested to buy a sick PSU. That's very obvious. The private sector will not be interested in acquiring loss making PSUs because there are certain employment liabilities and debt liabilities that the private sector will have to take care of. And second thing is, government should be actually focused upon the governance of the country and not doing business. So getting involved in PSUs basically means that government is in the business of making business. So that should not be the case. They should be actually facilitating, not actually be an active participant in that particular area. And also, disinvestment of profit making PSUs will help union government to extract maximum value, because if you are selling sick PSUs, it's not going to be productive. You are not going to get any returns out of it. But in case of selling profit making PSUs, it's obvious that you are going to expect returns. And as I mentioned, no one is also interested to buy sick PSUs. Actually, there are many methods in which disinvestment happens. So some of the methods are listed here. One is through public offer. So here the shares are sold directly to the public. So here public means we common citizens who can buy it from the share market, while the government holds majority of the share and management. So here, even though the government is selling through public offer, government would be holding the majority share. Let's say at least 51% of that particular PSU. And second comes the strategic sales. So here the control is transferred to the private entity. It's not to the public. So that's a different here. So a particular private entity is being selected to get control of the management or the whole organization. And next is buybacks. So government diverts its stake by returning, that is what we mean is returning its shares to the company that are then cancelled. So basically, if the government had bought it back from the public sector and it had made entity as a public sector unit by acquiring certain shares, it would be basically giving it back to that particular organization itself, so that it would be run on its own by its own management and without any government interference unless for regulatory purposes. And next is sale to employees. So this is another way where the options like employee stock option, these kind of things are used, where the shares are sold to the employees of that particular PSU. And next is exchange traded fund. And we know, if you remember, Bharat 22 ETF exchange traded fund is an example to it. It's basically a basket of PSU shares. And the last one is CPSE to CPSE. So central public sector enterprise would be selling it to the another central public sector enterprise. So this is how it happens. So here, this last option, it's basically transferring the funds from one PSU to the another one. And all these methods were used after 2004 actually. And in that, disinvestment through public offer had happened after 2004. And strategic sale was adopted in 1999 to 2004. So this is how the progress happened. These were the ways in which disinvestment has happened. And buybacks and ETFs that we discussed about are the recent routes that have been taken up by the government. And to ensure transparency, the interministerial group overseeing the process appoints the advisor. So basically, when such process happens, an interministerial group oversees the whole process itself of disinvestment. Okay, now let's see how this sale proceeds utilized. So now naturally, after selling it, the government would be receiving some funds. Successive governments have done disinvestment, but how they have actually utilized it, let's try to understand some history around it. United Front government used the revenue for social welfare program, and during Vajpayee regime, the money for retiring the government debt and restructuring PSUs. So these were the two objectives with which that money that was gained out of disinvestment was utilized for. And next, the UPA government objective of disinvestment was to bridge the fiscal deficit, because at that time we know FRBM came into picture and there was more importance given for reducing the fiscal deficit. And now the current government aims to utilize the proceeds to develop infrastructure. So this is expected to act as have a multiplier effect on the economy and close the revenue deficit. So this is all how this is disinvestment process has actually taken throughout this by various governments. Now the next article is tobacco taxes. So again, this is also related to your economy as well as to a major extent to society and social justice. So here smoking, we know it's a public health issue in India, and even though government is trying to tax it to deter consumption of tobacco, it has not been productive because the taxes are uneven and too low to limit the public consumption. So what needs to be done is simplifying the raising taxes and applying existing laws strictly. These are the two basic ambits within which the government has to take up to ensure the tobacco use is restricted. So first let's try to understand how the existing situation is. So the existing situation, as we discussed above, there is uneven in taxation. So what does this mean? Actually, in India, about 85% of tobacco users are using BDs and chew tobacco. So basically, these are at the lower end of the tobacco spectrum in terms of price, and they contribute only 15% of tobacco taxes. But the rest is paid by the cigarette users. So basically, 15% of the users are paying for almost 85% of the tobacco taxes, while 83% of the tobacco users are paying only 15% of the tobacco taxes. And also, after the introduction of GST, the states were restricted from levying tobacco taxes because it was brought under the habit of GST. And cigarettes are right now under GST regime are taxed at 28%. But even this is too low to have any significant impact in tobacco consumption. So what is being suggested is that a higher tax rate where it is about around 70% of the retail price, or either through additional excise duty. So either way, the taxation has to be improved. That is what the suggestion is. Because under GST, the maximum tax slab is 28%, and it is regarded like the lowest to even bring any significant impact. That's why it has to be increased. The taxation has to be increased significantly to deter the consumption of it. And one important aspect that needs to be studied is Karnataka model of bringing efficiency in restricting the tobacco use. So in Karnataka, actually, there is a challenge in raising the taxes because it is a tobacco producing state and it has a strong farmer lobby. So what happens is it's difficult for Karnataka to raise the taxes, but still there is a important aspect to Karnataka because they were able to effectively implement the restrict the tobacco usage consumption because of two things. One is they have been involving all the agencies in law enforcement, as well as they were educating the society by bringing in the implementation of the COPTA law. So COPTA is nothing but Cigarette and Other Tobacco Products Act. So under this, they also have booked many violations. This is another reason because they are able to strictly impose such laws. So there are two aspects to it. One is the active involvement, and next is active and effective usage of COPTA law itself. So these two pillars have helped Karnataka to actually deter consumption of tobacco. Karnataka has even developed an app for citizens to upload photograph of violators. So basically, any citizen who feels that the COPTA law is being violated can actually upload the photographs and bring it to the notice of the administrators. So this way, what the Karnataka government has actually done, or the Karnataka model has actually done, is though the taxes are low and it is very inefficient in limiting the tobacco use, they were efficient in the usage of and use and strict enforcement of existing laws. So this has basically compensated for the inefficient low taxes. This is how they have balanced it. So such a model can also be replicated in other states as well as throughout the country. So this is all about tobacco taxes, and we have come to the end of this session, students. So for more videos, subscribe to our channel and visit our platform scholar.com. Until next class, see you. Bye bye.